जय जय श्री राधे। श्री वल्लभाधीश की जय। सभी वैष्णवन को जय श्री कृष्ण, सादर सप्रेम जय श्री कृष्ण. Today we are concluding, this is the 26th day, and we're concluding the Varta of Amma. Once Ammaji, it's part 2. Once Ammaji placed a full bowl of milk in front of Sri Thakurji. She pulled the curtain to his place of seva and stepped outside. At that moment, Sri Gosaiji came to her house. He asked her where she was up to in her seva. Amma replied that, for him, any time was convenient for him to enter into the seva. Sri Gosaiji pulled back the curtain and entered. There he saw that Sri Thakurji was holding the bowl and drinking from it. Sri Gosaiji pulled the curtain closed again and came outside. Amma asked him why he had come out so quickly. Sri Gosaiji told her that Sri Thakurji was drinking his milk from the bowl. Amma said, "He's just a little boy, don't you know?" Sri Gosaiji asked her to be sure to send the prasadi milk to him in his camp. Amma said, "The milk is all yours. You can drink it here or there as you like." Sri Gosaiji was very happy to hear her loving words. He went to his camp. Amma brought the milk there and Sri Gosaiji drank it. Bhav Prakash, the inner meaning. Amma was Rohini in the Leela, and so she loved Sri Thakurji as her child. That is why Sri Gosaiji turned round when he saw him drinking the milk. Sri Gosaiji's Sri Thakurji is Sri Navanit Priyaji. If it had been he, then Sri Gosaiji would have held the bowl and given to drink to the Lord. However, there is a lot of affection between Sri Chandravali and Rohini. Rohini knows Chandravaliji's heart. That is why Sri Gosaiji asked for the prasadi milk to be sent to him in his camp. This is the love that ensues from their relationship in the Leela. Amma then said, "Drink it here or there as you wish." In other words, you are Sri Thakurji, and Sri Thakurji lives with me by your grace alone. So my Sri Thakurji is your Sri Thakurji too. Part 2 continued. After Ammaji left her body, Sri Gosaiji took her Sri Thakurji to be served together with Sri Navanit Priyaji. Rohiniji, Amma, and Sri Gosaiji Chandravaliji had a mutual affection for each other. Rohiniji was most instrumental in the Leela, therefore Sri Gosaiji had great respect for Ammaji. Part 2 continued. Ammaji was thus the recipient of great grace from Sri Acharyaji. This story teaches that Sri Thakurji cannot tolerate his devotees' suffering. A Vaishnava should be most tolerant of any worldly or scriptural problems and never let them affect their mood in seva. If a Vaishnava should have any problem at all, it should be exclusively be related to Sri Thakurji. Repeating, a Vaishnava should be most tolerant of any worldly or scriptural problems and never let them affect their mood in seva. If a Vaishnava should have any problem at all, it should be exclusively related to Sri Thakurji. Thus concludes Varta 12, the story of Amma Kshatrani, although there is truly no end to her story. Continuing on now to Varta 13, the story of Gajan Dhawan Kshatri from Agra. Part 1. Gajan Dhawan Kshatri served Sri Navanit Priyaji, who had been given to him by Sri Mahaprabhuji. The rest of this story will appear in the later account of one Kshatriya lady. Bhav Prakash. In the eternal Leela, Gajan Dhawan is Sri Chandravaliji's Saki named Subhanana. She was born 2 days after Sri Thakurji on the 10th day of the calendar. For that reason, Shubhanana played many childhood games with the Lord. Shubhanana would recount all of the playful pastimes of her Lord to Sri Chandravaliji, hence she was very dear to her. This is why Sri Acharyaji gave Sri Navanit Priyaji into Gajan Dhawan's seva. Sri Navanit Priyaji was Sri Gosaiji's Sri Thakurji, but since Gajan Dhawan was Sri Chandravaliji's Saki and had always played with the Lord, therefore, within this relationship, they played together again. Part 1. After a very short time, Sri Navanit Priyaji began to give his direct experience to Gajan Dhawan. The Lord pretended that Gajan was a cow or a horse and would sit on his back. Whilst he was crawling in this game, Gajan Dhawan's knees were rubbed raw, but he was so lost in the bliss of the game that he did not notice. So Sri Navanit Priyaji told Gajan Dhawan to take him to Sri Acharyaji's place and told him also to stay there. Bhav Prakash. The reason for this is that Gajan became so affectionate for the Lord that he forgot about the rules of seva, e.g. that Sri Thakurji also needs to rest sometimes. Sri Thakurji reasoned that Gajan had already reached the stage of addiction to the Lord, and so it would not be the best thing for him to stay at home. Part 1 continued. Gajan immediately brought Sri Navaneet Priji to Gokul and prostrated low before Sri Acharyaji, to whom he announced, "Look, Sri Navaneet Priji has come to your home in Gokul." Sri Acharyaji said, "I do not have a separate bed for him, nor any new vessels. Why did you suddenly bring him here?" Gajan Davan replied that it was Sri Navaneet Priji's wish. Sri Acharyaji prepared some offerings for the Lord and then rubbed himself with fragrant oil and let him sleep next to him. Bhav Prakash. The reason that Sri Acharyaji rubbed his body with sonda, fragrant oil, is that it represents the fragrance of Sri Swaminiji's form, and that fragrance is her love for the beloved Lord. This is not revealed in the story. Hence we understand that Sri Acharyaji is Sri Swaminiji's form, and so he thus took rest together with Sri Thakurji. In order to keep some rule of respectful distance, Sri Acharyaji had a small bed made and put Sri Navaneet Priji there to rest. Sri Navaneet Priji told Sri Acharyaji that the bed was too small and his feet were dangling over the edge. "I will sleep with you again," he said. Bhav Prakash. Sri Navaneet Priji was really asking Sri Acharyaji whether he thought of him as a small child. He said, "I am in my youth in your seva, but the sentiment of Sri Yashodaji, I am a child, but you should have known better than to make such a tiny bed for me." Part 1 continued. Sri Acharyaji again applied fragrant oil and slept next to Sri Thakurji. The next morning he arranged for a larger bed to be constructed and brought there, and then Sri Navaneet Priji took rest on that bed, but objected and told Sri Acharyaji he wanted to sleep with him. Sri Acharyaji told his beloved Lord that in order to teach some propriety in Seva, he should sleep there. He told him that he had arranged for a representative form of Sri Swaminiji to be placed near the bed as well, and I am here next to you, like Sri Swaminiji. Bhav Prakash. Here the teaching is that it is important for one to behave according to the rules, because otherwise a soul can fall down from their piety when people are nosy and begin to copy such activities, although they are not qualified to understand. From that moment, Sri Navaneet Priji slept in his own bed. Part 2. Gajan Davan used to sit in the doorway of Sri Navaneet Priji's temple during the Seva and then stay inside the temple when Sri Thakurji was taking rest. He played with Sri Navaneet Priji. In fact, he was never separate from him. One day they had no palm leaves to offer. Sri Acharyaji's wife asked Gajan to go to the market to fetch some, and she gave him the money to pay for them. Bhav Prakash. Gajan could not tell Sri Akaji that he was playing with Sri Navaneet Priji and therefore could not go. Even though Sri Navaneet Priji was talking to him, it was his duty to fulfill the Guru's wish first and foremost. Sri Thakurji is pleased when a Vaishnava keeps such rules. So Gajan went to fetch the leaves. However, Sri Navaneet Priji did not tell him not to go, because he wanted to see this love of a Vaishnava devotee. Gajan Davan left the house to go and fetch the leaves, but before he got very far, he found himself unable to bear the separation he already felt like a burning fever. He got to the market but fell unconscious in one shop. He had already attained the state of divine addiction. He only ever spoke to Sri Acharyaji or the rare other Vaishnava who was lost in love with the Lord. Otherwise, he was not aware of his body. Sri Acharyaji prepared the lunch offerings for Sri Navaneet Priji, but when he went to give them to the Lord, the latter said, "I will only partake of these offerings when Gajan returns." Sri Acharyaji asked everyone where Gajan was. Sri Akaji then told him that she had sent him to go and buy some pan leaves. Sri Acharyaji questioned why she had sent Gajan, who was so close to Navaneet Priji, and further told her never again to send him out to fetch anything. Bhav Prakash. Gajan Davan had attained the stage of full fruition of devotion. His mind and heart were constantly, inextricably attached to the Lord. Part 2 continued. Sri Akaji agreed never to send him on any other task again. Sri Acharyaji told one Vaishnava to go quickly and bring Gajan home from where he was lying in the shop, and meanwhile to bring the palm leaves. The Vaishnava went and there found Gajan lying near the entrance door. The Vaishnava called to Gajan, "Sri Acharyaji is calling for you." Hearing this, Gajan's fever of separation was quelled, and he came running back. He asked Sri Navaneet Priji why he had not had his lunch, and the Lord replied, "You have. Come back now, so I will eat." This shows how much affection these two had for each other. Gajan was such an accomplished devotee Vaishnava. Bhav Prakash. This Varta teaches that the state of divine addiction is very elevated because it binds Sri Thakurji to the devotee. Sri Kumbandas has written, "When the devotee and the Lord both feel separation from each other, and then the jiva is pleased." Here we see Gajanji's and Sri Navaneet Preji's intense love for each other. Thus concludes Varta 13, the story of Gajan Dhawan, although truly there is no end to his story. Continuing on now to Varta 14, the story of Narayan Das Brahmachari, a Saraswat Brahmin from Mahavan. Part 1. Narayan Das's Sri Thakurji, whom he served, was Sri Gokul Chandramaji. The whole of this story will be told later in the story of one Kshatriya lady, which will recount the 4 Sri Thakurjis and his 4 Vaishnavas servants. Bhav Prakash. In the eternal Leela, Narayan Das is a Sakhi named Madhurekshana of Radha Sahachari, who was the most important amongst the 16,000 Agni Kumarika maidens. Her eyes were most sweetly beautiful. When she looked at the beauty of Sri Thakurji's lotus face, she would completely forget her body. Thus she was full of attachment to the beauty of his form, which she would contemplate 24 hours a day. Part 1 continued. Narayan Das used to serve his Sri Thakurji very nicely, with the feeling that Sri Thakurji was a very tender and sensitive youth. He used to wash the grass that he fed to his cow so that there would be not any dust in the milk that she produced for him to drink. He even used to worry about dust in the milk. In the same way, he was very fastidious in his preparation of vegetables and other food materials. He did not want his Sri Thakurji to have any complaint at all about anything. Narayan Das was very renounced. He survived on donated grain, but was very selective about its source and would only take a handful. He lived on a variety of freshly acquired grains that came to him without him even asking. Sometimes he would find coins in the soil that he used to clean his feet, but he would cover them up with the soil and walk away without even touching it. One night a lot of money appeared at the foot of his bed, which he saw in the morning. He called his niece and asked her to remove it, saying that there was a lot of rubbish in the house that needed to be brushed away. She would come and sweep the place and throw it all in the rubbish. Then she would purify the area with a smooth layer of fresh cow dung. Bhav Prakash. Narayan Das was of celibate nature from birth, but from the time when he was a child tried a lot of ways to make some money, but was never successful in his endeavour. It was not until he was 40 that he met and was initiated by Sri Acharyaji, which is when he came to know about Sri Thakurji, and he began to see money as having no more value than ashes. The riddhis and siddhis, qualities of personal and physical perfection, came to him to test him, and money would appear before him, but he regarded it all as useless sewage and would just bury it wherever he found it. He thought of money as the way in which others' minds become corrupted, and so he would thus hide it. That is why when money appeared in his house, he told his niece that a lot of rubbish was all over the floor. He would not touch it but his niece was a servant of and recipient of the grace of Sri Acharyaji, and so she knew Narayan Das's true form, so she would deal with it. Narayan Das was the Sakhi of Radha Sahachari named Madhurekshanam, or the one with very sweet eyes. The niece was his Sakhi called Chatura. She was very dear to Narayan Das because she was expert in food preparations. She had been widowed at a very young age, and that is how she came to live with Narayan Das. She retained her Leela name here and was thus called Chatura. When she heard Narayan Das ask her to sweep the money away, she did it immediately and purified the place with cow dung. Sri Thakurji was very pleased with her intelligence. In this way, the two of them used to serve Sri Gokul Chandramaji. One day after bathing, Narayan Das went to his part 2. One day after bathing, Narayan Das went into Sri Thakurji's temple and after offering him breakfast, began to dress and adorn him. Whilst looking at his Sri Thakurji's lotus face, he became stunned and stared at him for a long time. Then he asked the Lord, "Where will this cloud of grace shower down its blessings?" Very happily the Lord told him it will shower upon Sri Raghunathji. Narayan Das was very contented. The reason for this is that Radha Sahachari here appeared as Sri Gosaiji's son, Sri Raghunathji. She had been given the boon by Sri Ramji that he would bless her with his love in Braj, thus her heart's desire would be fulfilled. This is why Sri Gosaiji had named his son thus. He would be very pleasing to all and able to steal everyone's heart. So Sri Raghunathji was the most beautiful Radha Sahachari. Also Sri Gokul Chandramaji, very beautiful, is Radha Sahachari's Sakhi, Narayan Das, Madhurekshana. For this reason, Narayan Das was very happy to hear that the cloud would rain down upon Sri Raghunathji, with whom they had the relationship of an eternal Lord and beloved husband. Part 3. One day when Narayan Das had made the lunchtime offerings and stepped outside, he sat down and cried, as his heart was full of love. His niece asked him, "I wonder how Sri Thakurji is enjoying his meal." She sat and thought about it. She asked Narayan Das, "Were you thinking the same thing?" Most disciples of Sri Acharyaji ask the Lord that he accept the offerings in the name of Sri Mahaprabhuji. However, you are the recipient of special grace from Sri Acharyaji, and so Sri Thakurji will accept the offerings even when you ask him yourself. Narayan Das replied that one should know that Sri Thakurji had accepted the day's offerings when a Vaishnava suddenly appeared at the door and enjoyed the day's prasad. Bhav, Prakash. When offerings are made, then the Lord certainly accepts them, but normally when it is known that a Vaishnava will be coming to take prasad, then extra preparations are made. In this case, the Lord eats according to the Vaishnava. So here the important word is suddenly. When there is no particular invitation for anybody to come for prasad, then one should do what one always does, makes as many nice preparations as there are supplies for in the house. Then when a Vaishnava comes, you feed them, and then you have shared your portion with them. In this way, Sri Thakurji makes sure that everyone gets some Mahaprasad. This is the loving way of the Vaishnava. When they turn up out of the blue, you make sure that they are not hungry and make sure that they have their share and feel very glad to have the chance to feed them. Then you know that the Lord accepted that day's offerings. Therefore, it is written in the Sri Shiksha Patra that when a great Vaishnava is satisfied, then know that the Lord is pleased. Narayan Das has had incomparable love in his heart for the Vaishnavas. We conclude for today and continue tomorrow with part 4 of the Varta of Narayan Das. Jai Shri Krishna. Shri Balabhadisha ki Jai. Jai Jai Shri Radhe. Jai Jai Shri Radhe.